Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. State Representative Blaine Wilhire, South Central Illinois, Vice Chairman of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, here with several of our colleagues. In response to what we just seen up on the floor, what we've seen today in the People's House was not serious dialogue. It was pure political theater, fantasy land, dangerously naive, a complete disassociation from the reality that we live here in the state of Illinois and they live in the city of Chicago. Folks, it's not easy to say, but the Marxists are in complete control, and Lord have mercy on the people in the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. Critical theory is going to rule today, and the folks there are going to continue to pay the price. Now, you know, I can say personally, and I think everybody can say up here that I love Chicago. We love Chicago. It's a great city. It's beautiful. It's world class. And it's imperative for a strong Chicago if we're going to have a thriving Illinois. But let's be real. Chicago's not well. Contrary to what you heard from the mayor-elect, it's a disaster. It's a complete disaster. The fiscal house is falling down. Has been for some time. And let's get real, Chicago does not have enough for everybody. Like the mayor-elect said, it barely has enough to meet its obligations. The highest taxes in the country, credit rating, junk. The city's not safe. It's not safe for residents. It's not safe for business. It's not safe for employees. It's not safe for the tourists that we count on. The chaos in Chicago, as we've seen over the past couple weeks, is a national embarrassment. It's a disgrace. Young people out of control, taking over the streets, robbing, beating innocent bystanders with no remorse, no regard for basic decency. And are these people punished? Is there any accountability? Is there any consequences? There's no consequences in the city of Chicago. Instead, Brandon Johnson makes excuses for them. They shouldn't be criticized. They shouldn't be held to account because they can't help it. They've been starved of opportunities in their own communities, as he said. And, you know, the folks up here from our parts of the state, we can empathize with that. Terrible policy from people like Brandon Johnson and the folks that supported him have starved our communities in our part of the state of opportunities for generations. So we know all about that. Because of them, all of our good jobs, or a lot of them, too many of them, have left. Radical, bought and paid for Democrat policies have starved this entire state of opportunity. They own all of this. Let's make no mistake about this. And doubling down on their Marxist nonsense will put the final nail in the coffin for this state if we don't fight back. You know, you can't fight for working people if every policy you push props up the unsustainable agenda of the special interests. You can't fight for working people if your policies make it impossible to create good working class jobs in this state. You can't fight for the working folks if the people in your city can't be confident in basic levels of safety. Mr. Mayor-elect, if you want to make Chicago the world-class powerhouse that it should be, that we all want it to be, that we all need it to be, let's stop all this talk about equity. All we talk about here is equity, equity, equity. Let's stop all the talk about equity and let's start focusing on real opportunity. Let's talk about work. Let's face the reality that the Democrat policies in this state have destroyed the ability for too many working folks in every part of this state to make a decent wage here. Let's talk about how the Democrats have tried to replace the traditional family with government and thereby wrecked our entire culture. You want to talk about root causes? We're open for that. Let's talk about root causes. But the radical nonsense and the excuse making for this conduct has to end. It's time that Chicago and Illinois get serious and clean up their mess. And we're here to do that. We're here to help that. We've got the policies to do that. And I want to turn it over to my friend, Representative Brad Halbrook.
Thank you, Representative Wilhire. Brad Halbrook, representative in the 107th from Shelbyville. Much has been made about the great divide between Chicago and the rural parts of the state of Illinois. I want to be clear that everyone in my district understands the importance of Chicago, not just to the state, but to the nation and to the world. Yes, certainly there is a deep ideological divide between the people in my district and the city of Chicago leaders on many issues. but there is a recognition by everyone, regardless of party affiliation, that a strong and healthy Chicago is good for Illinois and the nation as a whole. Not only is Chicago an international hub for business, but millions of people visit the Windy City every year, and these tourism dollars are vital to our state. We all want Chicago to succeed. Unfortunately, what we've heard today does not inspire confidence that Chicago is moving in the right direction. The mayor-elect has an opportunity to lead on these issues like crime and taxes, but he has shown an unwillingness to embrace the policies that changes that are needed. His speech today was nothing more than more of the same. Imagine being a Missouri resident contemplating visiting Chicago and seeing what has happened on Michigan Avenue. People do not want to visit places where they may get mugged or beaten. Many of the victims of these crimes were tourists in the city of Chicago. Brandon Johnson has no plan and no vision to reduce crime or to make Chicago safer. Doing defund the police differently is still defunding the police. It's a failing approach that will further erode a once great city. Chicago needs real leadership and not more radicalism. Mayor-elect Johnson praised the Chicago, Illinois progressive Marxists. He laid out a progressive Marxist wish list and a roadmap that is showing Illinois citizens the way out to Texas, Tennessee, Florida, and many other low or no tax and low regulation states. Many Illinois citizens have decided that living next to a gyp stack or a phosphate mine in Florida to be less toxic than living in the state of Illinois. Thank you. And with that, Representative Senator.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to be with you all here today. My name is Adam Niemerg, State Representative, 102nd District. I represent Southeast Illinois. And folks, what we saw today was ridiculous rhetoric out of a progressive, woke mayor-elect who has no real solutions for the problems facing the good folks of the city of Chicago. You know, the last mayor that was a Republican in Chicago was before the Depression. The Democrats are the ones being divisive. Okay, they're the ones holding opportunity back. They're the ones that have brought economic opportunity to a complete standstill in the city of Chicago. You have Citadel, Boeing, Caterpillar, and many other businesses that have fled this state because of poor public policy. Small business is dying. People are leaving. Data point after data point shows we are going in the wrong direction. And as you've seen with the businesses that are leaving and the ones that are staying, they can't take much more. Woke, progressive, anti-business policies are leaving this state in ruins. You know, a lot was said about a blue wall in that speech today, about the great blue wall. To everyone in Chicago, if you're tired of high crime, skyrocketing property taxes, rampant abortion, attacks on law enforcement that seem to be never-ending, and indoctrination in your schools, leave the woke dumpster fire behind you, move to the rural parts of the state, and let's build a red wall. With that, I'd like to introduce Senator Andrew Chesney.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Senator Andrew Chesney. I represent Northwest Illinois. I don't think that many thought just 2 weeks ago you could go to the left of Lori Lightfoot, and we saw that just a few weeks ago in a recent election. And I think a lot of people scratched their head in Chicago and throughout the state of Illinois and perhaps the country, how a record, as our colleagues have pointed out, that have been almost predominantly dominated by Democrat and toxic policies, and how these can reflect well in the state of the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. And we could look at education and the failing grades. We can look at the crime problems, and we see this national debate on crime all the time. This happens every day in the city of Chicago, folks. Every day, people of color are getting hurt and shot at, and yet people in Chicago are largely silent on it. They want more gun control. We have the most restrictive gun legislation in the entire country, but certainly in all of the Midwest, we have some of the most restrictive gun regulation. And yet, people are getting hurt. And all we ask as Republicans is people that do bad things get punished. That's all we ask for. That That isn't a controversial position. We're asking for people to be held accountable. And yet what we saw is the governor and now the speaker and the president provide cover to distract from this progressive ideology. That's what this was today during this joint session, was to offer cover for the mayor-elect. Because his issues of not caring for police officers and law and order and not protecting his residents is very alive and well in his policies and what he said on the campaign trail. And you're probably asking why those are standing up against the mayor and these progressive ideology and this progressive position is because it affects us too. Chicago's problems ultimately become the state's problems. That's why the mayor's down here right now asking for hundreds of millions of dollars of new revenue, while he has seen an outmigration of people that once used to say yes to Chicago are now saying no, and they're firing the mayor and moving somewhere else. Well, pretty soon those people that are firing Chicago, they end up firing the state of Illinois and they move. And so while we see an outmigration of population within our state, all we're asking for are very simple things. Let's hold the very few, but the bad teachers accountable. If they are failing our kids, let's just hold them accountable. And the people that protect the status quo is the Chicago Teachers Union. They're the ones that elected the mayor-elect a few weeks ago. And the policies that they put forward are hurting the next generation of doers in our society. It is not controversial to say that I support law enforcement and that I want bad people that do bad things to go to jail. That is not controversial. That isn't some right-wing position. That's common sense. And you know what we hear from the left? We hear all about equity. Equity was when the governor allowed people to jump the line, and he allowed COVID shots to go in people's arms that were prisoners ahead of our elderly. He let people that had cancer patients have to wait while he vaccinated people in prisons first. That's the record of the radical left. That's why we're here right now talking about the progressive policies that are putting forward in Chicago that are impacting all of us. Because make no mistake, Chicago's problems become our problems very, very quickly. And here's how I know why. Is because the mayor's not down here right now for any other reason to ask for more money. First, it becomes the money that he's going to take out of the Chicago coffers. Then it's going to be the money that comes out of all our pockets too. And that's why we have to stand up against this. And that's why we're right on the issues. And we have to stop this left-wing progressive ideology that is destroying and crushing our state. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Senator Chapin Rose.
Chapin Rose, 51st Senate District. Look, I'm here for one reason and one reason alone. I'm a former prosecutor, and what happened last weekend was ridiculous. Okay? There shouldn't even been a question about it. Mollycoddling the criminal class, refusing to condemn in the strongest terms possible what happened, terrorizing tourists is not an economic development strategy for the city of Chicago. Okay? End of story. Well, we're a bunch of guys from down to Illinois. Here's what the former Chicago police superintendent said, Eddie Johnson, getting a lot of feedback. Quote, what I'm hearing from cops is that that these young folks are taunting them. Ha ha ha, you can't chase me, you can't do this. They're making fun of the police. Okay? The new restrictive foot police pursuit policy is contributing to cops feeling that their hands are tied. That was part of the story, not the direct quote. But here's another quote from Superintendent Johnson. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. That's what the police are, that's where they're at. People like Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson, Senator Peters, tying the police's hand behind their back and then pretending that what happened Saturday night is, oh, it's no big deal, nothing to see here. Well, you know what? The whole world saw it. The whole world saw it. And it wasn't exactly a welcome to Chicago postcard. This whole state is inextricably linked to the economic engine that is Chicago. Whether we like it or not, we're linked to it. terrorizing tourists does nothing to advance the city of Chicago. Mollycoddling the criminal class does nothing to advance the city of Chicago. I mean, taxes, he comes down help for. Look, guys, a healthy economy doesn't ask for more taxes. You know why? Because it's growing. That's why. Because it's growing. The reason they're asking for more taxes is because people are leaving. I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I'm not going to condone 1 minute what happened Saturday. I'm certainly not going to dignify the mayor-elect's comments about it. But I do stand with the men and women of blue, not just the Chicago Police Department, but across this whole state and this country. Thank you.
Not sure. I mean, you obviously have been given a pro-law enforcement message, but just to ask, because it's been on social media and people are talking about it, can you talk about the Blue Lives Matter flags that were on some of the members' desks during Brandon Johnson's speech? Anyone have any comment about that? On the Republican side specifically.
Yeah, I didn't see him personally, but I think that's extremely appropriate. The Republican Party is widely renowned for supporting the police, and Brandon Johnson's been pretty clear that he's been pretty adversarial to law enforcement, and we see, like Senator Rose said, we've seen the consequences of that. We see it on the streets. We see it with these young people, not just young people, but everybody, the complete disregard for human dignity, human life in particular in the city. So yeah, I think it's appropriate. I support that 100%. If somebody would have given me one, I would have put it up too.
Not sure how hopeful you are with this. I mean, there were a couple of like claps on the Republican side when Johnson did give like a briefly positive message about law enforcement wanting to make sure that there were enough police on the streets. He kind of alluded to that a little bit. I mean, what's your?
Well, I think he got to. That's the reality, you know. I mean, he's got to pay lip service to that. Everybody supports the police, or should 100%. We don't see that coming out of here, but you know, I'm happy that he said it, but I'm not holding my breath.
You can't tie one harm behind their back.
Right.
I mean, like, you can have as many cops as you want, but you're not going to let them arrest anybody and actually keep them in. Sorry. You can hire all the police you want, but if you're actually not going to arrest anybody and keep them in jail, it doesn't matter. Okay? You can't. That's right. Yeah, you can't. If you're not going to prosecute them, it doesn't matter. Yet if you're going to tie one hand behind their back, it doesn't matter how many you hire. Okay? The cops that I talk to, again, I talk to them all over the state. I talked to the FOP guys when they're down last week. They are fed up and tired because they have one hand tied behind their back. And when they do make an arrest, they walk right back out the next day. And you know where they go the next day? They go back and throw another brick. Or they go back and do whatever they do. But the bottom line, anyway.
You talked about hundreds of millions of dollars. I think Senator Chesney, where do you guys think that money's going to come from? What kind of tax increases, or is it going to be diverting from, one fund to another? How do you see that playing out?
Well, ultimately, everybody in the state of Illinois is going to pay it, right? That's why he's down doing the apology tour, right? So he came out with this very extreme view. He has to come down here where most of his caucus probably thinks he's pretty extreme. And so he's going to try to moderate his positions. And now they have all these great ideas, and everybody claps about all these great ideas. But ultimately, who pays for it is we do, right? We pay for the defund the police movement, right? Because when people don't want to be cops, it increases the cost of being a police officer, right? And so when we have mayors here today, they're having trouble finding police officers. Well, they have to raise wages for that, right? And in order to raise wages, they have to raise their budgets. So we're impacted throughout the entire state, regardless of where you live. And those policies that are coming out of Chicago are very, very toxic. And how they're going to pay for it is, first, they're going to ask us to make minor tweaks to the legislation that affects Chicago. But then they're going to ask us to do things for Chicago exclusively. We do this all the time. Mayor Lightfoot came into our caucus asking us to change the way that the casino was allocated for revenue, right? First question I would ask is, why is she coming to our caucus? Because they have an unbelievable thirst and desire to spend. And at first it impacts the people of Chicago, they move. Then it impacts the people in the collars, they get fed up and leave the state. And then who ends up paying most of the bill are the rural people in the state of Illinois. That's why you see the frustration.
Yeah, real quick, so follow up on what Andrew said. I talked to all law enforcement in my area, and before we would have a job, open for sheriff's department, and they would get 30, 40 applicants, right? Now they get 2 or 3. And of those 2 or 3, they actually don't want to hire any of them because those individuals that are qualified for that job, they're moving. One, either don't want to be a law enforcement officer or they're going to do it in another state. So we've been feeling this for years, a couple years, and it hurts every local law enforcement department.
Before we wrap this up, I want to say something to everybody out there that's listening and watching. If you're planning to come to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, pay attention to what's going on. Pay attention. What you saw last weekend is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the beginning. Be very aware of the environment that you're being invited to. Now, I understand the mayor said it's $150 million floating around in their economy. But what's it worth? Is it worth your safety? I'm just telling you, this is not a safe community for outsiders. And the people that live there, they're realizing it's not a safe community for them. So that's a word that I would like to get out to the people of America. Be very cautious about coming to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention.
Amy's got a couple of words.
Yeah, actually, I do. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm Amy Grant. I'm in the 47th District in DuPage County. I have just DuPage County. I have all of Wheaton and Winfield and a couple of other, like Carroll Stream and so forth. But the reason I'm here to talk is because in DuPage County, we're seeing the crime levels go up because of our neighboring Cook County. Last Saturday, when the ruckus was going on, last Saturday night there, the ruckus was going on in Chicago, on Roosevelt Road, in Lombard, mind you, which is real close to where I live. They had to shut the carnival down because of all the misbehavior. In Villa Park, not long ago, there was a vape shop. The vape shop was being looted by 2 men. The owner called the Villa Park police. The Villa Park police show up. The looters run out of the vape shop with their guns, shooting at the police officers. This is what is going on. And you can only go talk to our state's attorney, Bob Berlin, talk to our sheriff, James Mendrick. We have a jail in DuPage County, and believe you me, we are having problems. And it's because of this crime. And I don't see that Brandon Johnson, he was bragging about all the money that they put into schools and crime. But if they've put all this money into schools and crime, why is there still a problem? So you wonder in the future, throwing money at government agencies, does it? I don't know. I wish I knew. I do not hold any bad feelings towards Chicago. I wish this wasn't happening. It doesn't make me feel good to talk about this and have it as a reality. But it is, and it's coming towards my community. Thank you.
The mayor talked about, in his statement after the weekend, crime and violence, saying that, it's a lack of opportunity they have. I mean, Democrats have run Chicago forever. What are they getting wrong, and why don't they have that opportunity? I mean, they've been running the city.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. That's something that we talk about all the time. Opportunity, that's the key. That's the key. If you want to defeat crime, if you want to defeat all of this stuff, we need to bring opportunity. But it gets back to everything that we do here revolves around, everything is done for the special interest by the special interests here, and the regular folks get left behind. opportunity in our part of the state is gone because of policies. It's gone because of taxes, because of regulations. We're at the bottom on every metric a job creator would want to look at to come here and invest. And when you put on top of that the quality of life stuff, they're not comfortable being safe on the street in the biggest cities in this state, that's your opportunity problem. And that's what I was getting at before. This laser-like focus on equity. I sit on the education committees and a lot of these appropriations, everything revolves around equity. A lot of times equity is the lowest common denominator. We're shooting for the wrong thing here. Equity, this coupled from opportunity is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. So we've got to get serious about going over the top at this point, because that's what it's going to take to bring people to this state that are going to create jobs. And we don't do that by coddling criminals. We don't do that by doing everything to the benefit of the special interests. For the teachers' unions, we're specifically with Brandon Johnson, we know who he's going to be beholden to. How much money did they give him? That's the thing. Big money special interest gives big money to politician. Politician maintains the status quo, and the working people in this state continue to get hammered, and the good ones continue to leave.
The ones who can continue.
That's right, the ones who can. Yeah, they're destroying opportunity in their own communities. That's the biggest problem I have with this. That's the biggest problem I have with Brandon Johnson talking about these people are rioting because they've been starved of opportunity. Well, who the hell starved them of opportunity? Who's been running this state for a generation? Democrats got a supermajority in both chambers of the General Assembly. They got the most radical governor in the nation. They've had almost every governor over the past decade and a half. Who's robbing these people of opportunities? Start asking that. Start asking that to these people when they come in and whine and complain about our communities are being starved. They're being starved because they've perpetuated public policy that has literally starved their own people.